Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to this event, which is run in collaboration between the Cambridge Union and the Wilberforce Society. I'm going to have some announcements at the very end. So the format of this is Jorge is going to give a speech for about 15 minutes. We'll have a Q&A, and then we'll have half an hour for any questions that people in this room have. Jorge Jraissati is the president of the Venezuelan Alliance, which is an international platform that promotes human rights, democracy, and economic development in Venezuela. He is also a graduate visiting fellow of the Abigail Adams Institute at Harvard University, and this summer was involved in the process of passing the Venezuela TPS Act through the US Senate, which aimed to extend temporary protected status in the US to Venezuelan nationals. So please join me in welcoming Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. The first people I want to say thank you is the few Venezuelans that are here in the audience. I think for me it's extremely important that you are here, because imagine a country in which 30 million people do not have freedom of speech. A country in which if you speak out, a country if you want to do political activism, then your future is to go to jail, or then your future is to even being killed. So the fact that we are here tonight talking about what is happening in Venezuela, I think I'm here on behalf of them, of my people in my country. I'm speaking out because they need to be heard. You have 30 million people that are right now basically jailed, in which you don't have free media, in which they basically have no hope in a democratic future unless we do something. So that's why I want to say thank you to my fellow Venezuelans here. I think this is really a golden opportunity that we Venezuelans have to show the world, not only the horrible things that are happening right now in Venezuela, the humanitarian crisis, the migratory crisis, the political collapse that we are seeing in Venezuela, but at the same time about the great things that we will do in the future. I was just telling a friend this afternoon that even though today you will see Venezuela on the news about the economic collapse and about these kind of problems, I hope that in the future we will have a Venezuela that will be a miracle again about economic growth, a miracle of political freedom. So that's why I want to say thank you to a few Venezuelans that are here. And I also want to say thank you to you that may be from here or to other countries. I think it shows a lot about the things that you believe. The fact that you are here, it means that you care about the human rights of other people. It means that you care about the freedom of other people. And that makes me optimistic about the future. We may differ the countries that we are from, we may differ of cultures or religion, even or political ideologies. But above left or right, there is human rights, there is political freedom, there is social freedom and economic freedom. And for that, I want to say thank you. And last, I want to say thank you to the Cambridge Union, to the Wilberforce Society, and to everyone who made this possible. I think the Cambridge Union represents everything I want for my country. A place in which we can debate, a place in which we can talk about our ideas, talk about our visions for the future, in which we can coexist, and that we can find tolerance and a middle ground, a consensus around the most important political subjects and political problems that we have right now in the world. And I really mean this. And so what I will try to say, what I will try to do in these 15 minutes, is I will try to explain what is happening in Venezuela, both from experiences with friends, family, my own experience as a political activist, at the same time with data, with economic thinking, political thinking behind everything I'm saying. Because I think it's important to have both debates. The debate about what is right, what is just, what is fair, and at the same time, how can we do to have this world? How can we have a world in which academic thinking and political activism can coexist? In which we know which policies we need to implement to eradicate sins such as poverty or inequality. How can we do that? And I think that if academia and political activism become closer, I think we can do that. So the first thing that I will do is that I will talk about the economic problem that we're facing in Venezuela. Right now in Venezuela, you have the worst economic collapse in the history of the Western Hemisphere. It's 60% of GDP that we have lost in the last 5 years. 60% of GDP is double the US Great Depression or the Greek crisis or the Spanish Civil War. It means that right now we have 90% of Venezuelans in poverty. It means that we have 70% of Venezuelans in extreme poverty. And it means that right now, Venezuelans can only afford 700 calories per day. In Venezuela, in the last 5 years, the minimum wage has fallen by more than 90%. So right now, minimum wage in Venezuela is around $5. Why? We will also talk about it. The humanitarian crisis in Venezuela is the worst that we have seen in the region, and that's why you have a migratory crisis as well. You have 6 million people who have left Venezuela to places such as Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, even some in Europe, and also in the US. And why is that happening? Because right now you have this humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, because you don't have political freedom, and because you have extreme violence in Venezuela right now. So how was Venezuela before this mess? How was it? It was a country that 20 years ago had a horrible economy? No, that was not the case. Let's go back to, for example, Venezuela in the 1980s. Venezuela in the 1980s was the most developed economy in Latin America, with the highest social mobility, with the highest human capital in Latin America, with the highest infrastructural projects of Latin America. It has a AAA bond rating, and it has the lowest inflation in the region. That was Venezuela in the 1980s. It was a country of opportunities. It was a country of freedom. It was a country with their own issues, because we have issues, but the solution of issues is always with more democracy and more freedom, and not less democracy and less freedom. So Venezuela in the 80s was like that, a good country. Then we had 2 decades of difficult conditions, in the 80s and in the 90s. We have what we call in Latin America the lost decade in the 1980s, that we fall by 1 or 2% per year in our GDP, and then the same in the 1990s. So by the end of the 90s, Venezuelans felt that the system was not suited for them, that it was not fair for them, that Venezuela could be better, and that's why they elected a political outsider, who was Hugo Chavez. But things got worse. Things got worse for the people that need us the most, and that's what is more tragic about Venezuela. Then in the 2000s, and then when Chavez died in 2013, Venezuela started not growing, started declining even more, even though we had the biggest oil bonanza in the history of our country. Just to give you an example, from 1998, when Chavez was elected, to 2013, we received $1 trillion on oil revenues. What happened with that money? Imagine in per capita how much is that for a country in Latin America. And what happened? It was mismanaged. It went to the hands of the crooks and not to the people. It went to subsidize bad policies, such as price caps, currency controls, expropriation, production quotas. That's the problem that we have in Venezuela. That in Venezuela, people want to work hard, people want to be entrepreneurs, people want to provide for their families, and you have a regime that systematically, for the last 10 years, have imposed problems to them, that has took away all our economic rights in Venezuela. In Venezuela, if you want to have a business and put prices on your products, you cannot. If you want to have an industry and produce, you cannot because you have quotas. If you want to import or export, you cannot because you have currency controls. So what type of country is that? That's what I want you to think about it. Because I have seen on first hand how people want to work in Venezuela, they want to be better in Venezuela, but they simply cannot. And at the same time, you have a public sector that has taken away all the resources from Venezuela. You have a public sector that has corrupted the judiciary system. Right now, the judiciary system in Venezuela is biased towards the regime, it's arbitrary, it's completely unbalanced, and it's very unpredictable in many ways. So how can you have rule of law? How can you have private property in a country like that? In a country in which 90% of our products have price caps, and the most essential products have production quotas, in which more than 50% of the economy was expropriated. How can you have a country like that? You cannot. And that's why people are leaving. And that's why we need to make a change. And we need to make a change now until it's too late, before it's too late. Because Venezuelans demand and they deserve freedom. And that's what we're trying to do. Some people may believe that we have an agenda or something else that is not like that. We're fighting for freedom, for democracy, for having the opportunity that regime is taking away from us. You have no idea of how many people, How many people receive calls every day? Crying because their families are divided, because you have a cousin in Madrid and you have another cousin in, I don't know, in Latin America, another one in the US. Families are divided because in Venezuela you cannot flourish. And why? It's because of those policies. It's because of a regime that took away the economic opportunities from the hands of Venezuelans to the hands of the crooks. And right now you have the military controlling the oil industry, you have the military controlling telecommunications, you have the military controlling the industry. And that's the worst scenario that you can have. And because of that, they don't only destroy the non-oil economy. Venezuela was a very important oil, it has a very important oil company called PDVSA. And in the first 14 years, it received $1 trillion of revenues. Now it's only producing at 20% of its capacity. Why? Because you have military controlling the oil sector. So not only they destroy the non-oil economy, they destroy the oil economy as well. And that's the huge problem that we are seeing right now in Venezuela. And for those people that may believe that under Chavez, conditions improve in terms of social programs, in terms of conditions for the poor, that is a lie. That is a straight lie. In Venezuela, first of all, the problem in Venezuela is that the provision of these public goods, of these social programs for the poor people were used to buy votes for clientelar purpose, were used to give niche for corruption and bribery, and were not used to help the people. And it is a shame, because again, in the last 20 years, we have the highest oil bonanza in our history. We could have been developing and we could have been helping the people that need us the most. There are people that are really suffering right now in Venezuela. Because the crooks, they have savings in dollars, for example. So hyperinflation does not affect them. But for the people that have salaries, for the people that work in Venezuela, if they have hyperinflation, all their savings are destroyed. Everything they work for. And salaries do not keep up with inflation. So in Venezuela last year, we have a 1 million % inflation. How can you have decent salaries with that? And the only thing that we are demanding is to have the political freedom, the elections in democracy, to change that. But in Venezuela, we also don't have political freedom. And that's, I think, the biggest problem. Because until we don't make a political change in Venezuela towards democracy, we will not have an economic recovery. Because the incentives of the dictatorship is keep destroying the economy, is keep destroying the conditions in Venezuela. So let's talk about the political aspect of things. How are things in Venezuela? Are things that horrible? Are things that horrible as you see in the news? Yes. Venezuela, for example, according to the Economist intelligence unit, is the second worst dictatorial country in the Western Hemisphere, only better than Cuba. You have arbitrary arrests, you don't have freedom of assembly, most political activists are either in exile or in jail, or even killed. A month ago, one political activist in Venezuela called named People, was killed by the dictatorship. And a year ago with Fernando Albán, the same. He was killed by the dictatorship. And we have right now 400 political prisoners in Venezuela. 400 people that are right now in jail, being tortured, only because they want a better future. Is that fair? That is not fair. And that's why I want to say again, thank you for this opportunity, because we need to say these things. Because we need people from all around the world talking about what is happening in Venezuela and also defending their political rights. The most precious thing that you can have is your freedom to elect your leaders, your human rights, the freedom to express freely your opinions, your ideas, your belief, and live in a country that is tolerant to that, and live in a country in which you can debate with people. So right now in Venezuela, we don't have that. When Chavez died, for example, in 2013, then Maduro was picked as his successor. And then he won in 2013 by less than 2%, which we believe it was a fraud, and I think it was a fraud. Because that's the only problem that we have in Venezuela, that the state, because it controls all the economy, then they can buy votes, because they control all the telecommunications, they can put propaganda everywhere, and because they're trying to control all aspects of our life, they have a huge political advantage. So then Maduro was president for all this year, and then last year, Last year we had the chance to change and to try to have an election and to try to make a change in Venezuela and try to be a better country again. And because, remember, in 2015, we went for elections for the National Assembly, and we won with 2/3 of the National Assembly. So we knew that if we had a chance to go against the ballots, even though they have all the political clientelism and all the political advantages, we knew that we could make a change in Venezuela. What happened? Maduro said, no, I will not do elections. I will not ask the people to vote for me. I will just re-elect myself, and I will do a sham election. And more than 60 countries said, no, that's not an election. Because we need an election that has international observancy, that you have NGO, that you have the UN, that you have the Organization of American States watching the election, seeing that everything is fine. And well, we don't have that. We have a sham election in which people do not vote. 60 countries did not recognize Maduro. And that's why, because his electoral term ended this January, according to our constitution, to Article 233, then the President of the National Assembly will be the interim President of Venezuela. And that's why Juan Guaidó is right now the legitimate President of Venezuela. And our roadmap is simple. We want to end Maduro's term, we want an interim government for a few months, and then we want fair elections, without political prisoners, without advantages to the state. We want a fair election in which everyone can participate, and then whoever is voted by Venezuelans, then you will have division of powers, then you will have rule of law. But that has been tough as well, because Maduro has the military, Maduro has the crooks. Our dictatorship is based on a military power. It's based on fear, and geopolitically is based on Russia and Cuba and their influence on the region. Which that goes to the third aspect of the crisis, which is going to be the last one, so then we can talk and we can have a Q&A. In Venezuela right now, Venezuela has become a geopolitical issue. Venezuela right now is not just a problem for Venezuelans, but it's a problem for everyone. First of all, 6 million people have left Venezuela, more than 20% of the population. Those people are going to countries that they don't have enough jobs, they don't have enough healthcare for them, and we need to find mechanisms to help them. So that's the first problem. And the second one is that in Venezuela, the regime, and this is according to the State Department, has close connections with Hezbollah and drug dealers. So Venezuela has become a problem for the security of the region, of the hemisphere, because of their close relationship with people like Hezbollah, and that is, again, this is confirmed by the State Department of the United States. So I think that's why we have a challenge in the international community. We need to find mechanisms to resolve and have a free Venezuela again, one in which we can have democracy. We need to have the international community and the people from all over the world helping us in our fight, because it's your fight as well. We cannot set the precedent of a country in the Western Hemisphere just being destroyed by a dictator. We need to set the precedent that the international community and the people from all over the world will fight for the rights of everyone. And that's why I began this presentation by thanking you. Because again, above all nationalities, there are human rights. Above all nationalities, there is political freedom. One people, one person, one vote. That's what we need. And then we can decide our future. And then we can find strategies to have a good Venezuela again, to have a country in which public goods such as healthcare, education are provided for everyone. Not for a few, not for people that are with their gene, but for everyone. We need to have an economy that provides for everyone. Good jobs, decent jobs. So that way we can encourage people from all over the world, or Venezuelans all over the world, to come back. And that's what we are demanding, nothing else. A responsible government with an economy that is open to innovation, to ideas, to entrepreneurship, and above anything else, human rights and political rights. Because we need it, because we demand it. And I think because Venezuelans, we deserve it. And not only we deserve it, we will do everything that is in our hands to do it. So again, in 10 years, I'm sure that you will watch the news and you will see a Venezuela that is thriving again. And that we will become again the example of the region and the world of how can we coexist together. People from the right, from the left, whatever, we can coexist. and we can talk about our issues, and we can find consensus, and we can find good public policies, and above all, that we are all brothers. Not because you are my political adversary, you are my enemy. It's not like that. Because I was born in a country in which I saw every day my parents watching the news, and you have a president like Chavez saying that the people that are not with him are traitors, are enemies, and I don't want that anymore. I think we're all brothers. I think we all want the same. We want a country that, we want a world in which there is no more poverty, in which we can eradicate that sin. And it doesn't matter where you are born, rich or poor, that you have opportunities, and you have education, and you can be better, and you have social mobility. And I think that's what I want for my country, again, of political, economic, and social rights. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One thing I'd like to talk a bit to you about is, because this might be something that some in the room would be interested in. In some of your work, you've been very critical of socialist policies. Do you think critics of socialist policies are too quick to make blanket judgments and base their criticisms on, for example, Venezuela's experience, rather than taking into account other more successful examples, such as Norway's social democratic model? I think we are here to study. There is a huge gap between Norway and Venezuela. And let's define concepts. What, to me, is socialism? Socialism, for me, is when you have a regime that has the means of production, that they call the shots in terms of the economy, in which they say who has the subsidy, who has the property, who has the opportunities. And that's Venezuela right now. In Venezuela, you don't have even a minimum of threshold of freedom. If you want to produce, you cannot. If you want to import or export, you cannot. The only things that you can do are the things that the government allows you. And if they allow you, it's because you have a connection with the regime. So that's what is happening right now in Venezuela. In countries like Norway, things are different. Those are countries with markets, with rule of law, that understand private property, and at the same time, they have a huge commitment on social programs, on welfare, on redistribution. I think it's two different mentalities, two different ideologies. What I would prefer a country in which you have independency, in which you have people working hard and you have good incentives. That's what I want. But Venezuela is just the exact opposite. What I want to encourage you is to see which are the policies of this country and which are the policies of the other country. Let's not talk about labels. Let's talk about what are the precise public policies. In Norway, you don't have hyperinflation. In Norway, you don't have a government that controls all the economy. You don't have that there. You have social programs, and I think that will be a different question to see if that's the best policies that they can do. But it's not even comparable to Venezuela. And you mentioned the international community. What would you like to see the international community doing at the moment vis-a-vis Venezuela?
In the interview that I just had before upstairs, I said that, and I thought there are two international communities. And the first one is people like you, is students. It's people from different places listening to what is happening to Venezuela and trying to help us. And I think it's our responsibility as Venezuelans to find mechanisms and channels and platforms so we can work together. So we can work together at the levels of universities, of political activists, of NGOs. And so in that regard, I think we can do even more. But opportunities like this one are extremely important for us. And the second international community is, of course, the UN, international institutions, and I think we can do even more with that. And because there is a lot of politics inside those organizations, because there is a lot of apathy inside those organizations, we are not doing enough, but we need to do more. For example, a couple of weeks ago, Venezuela was elected to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. How is that possible? How is that possible in a country in which I know people who have been tortured? And how it is possible that the same institution, the UN, they even acknowledge that the human rights of Venezuelans are violated every single day. So with those institutions, we need to pressure them more, we need to do lobby with them more, and we need to hold the public officials and the diplomats accountable. because they can be talking about beautiful things, about international cooperation and international harmony, but then when you see Venezuela in the Human Rights Commission of the UN, then you see the hypocrisy. And it's our job as young people to help them accountable.
Are you concerned about the exodus from Venezuela, and how do you envision the process of getting the millions who have left, like yourself, to return?
Yeah, it's tough. We're talking about it. We were talking about it yesterday. That is tough, because when people leave a country, they have the new families, new friends, new jobs, and I think that is a responsibility, and it's a strategy that we need to have, is to understand that it's difficult for many of them to come back, but there are many of them that will come back. And there are many of them that may not come back, but they will have new businesses. They will use their know-how that they gain outside Venezuela to start doing maybe joint ventures in Venezuela or things like that. And I think that's why it's extremely important to have a project of a new economy. We need to have a new economy that puts the opportunities in the hands of the people. And if we do that, many will go, many will have businesses there that will provide jobs, and I think many will at least pay a vacation in Venezuela.
And finally, you, as I mentioned earlier, you were very involved over the summer in work in the US, passing the TPS. And so could you outline to the audience from your what you're seeing, personally with your interactions, what the next steps are for the Venezuelan opposition?
Yeah, the TPS is temporary protection status in the United States. And well, if, for example, in places like Miami, of course, Florida, and California, you have a lot of Venezuelans. I try to meet with them, and most of them that just came to the States. And the first thing that they always tell you is how scared they are about the migratory process, how scared they are of lawyers that want to rip them off. And I know a lot of them, that lawyers just take away $5,000, $7,000 from them. And I think that's why they deserve to have this protection status, at least until we make a change in Venezuela. With the right incentives, with a bipartisan cooperation from Democrats and Republicans. But basically what I did is that I went to every NGO in Washington, when we met in Washington. I went to every NGO in Washington, Republicans and Democrats, and I talked to them why is that important and why they need to talk about it and to do it. And that's what I did. I tried to talk to politicians, I talked to universities like this one, because again, I really believe in the power of young people, and young people trying to fight for ideas. So that's what I did, and right now it passed in the Congress, but then we need the Senate as well, so maybe next year.
Fantastic. Right. Let's start with some questions from the audience then. I think microphones are going to be handed around, so if you just put your hand up. Yep, back there.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for the speech. Very inspiring. I was wondering that, have you heard of the cryptocurrency Venezuela government issued last year?
The cryptocurrency that they issued?
Yeah.
I mean, it is not really a cryptocurrency. It is just another scam of the regime. They will try to circumvent the sanctions using a cryptocurrency. Because you know that right now they cannot access the financial markets, the financial system of the US. So basically the government was trying to do their own cryptocurrency, based on oil reserves as a collateral of the currency. And so basically it was a sham and no one bought it. But it's ways that the government is trying to circumvent the sanctions, the financial sanctions, to the oil industry and to themselves as well.
Obviously the white elephant in the room, but it's nice technology that have the future. So how do you think about how to use this kind of technology to establish a new financial market over it and get the power from the government?
I know many people that, for example, try to transfer funds to Venezuela using regular cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and things like that. I'm not an expert, but I know that, for example, blockchain technology is something that will revolutionize finance in general. And I think cryptocurrencies are a way that people are trying to circumvent dictatorial governments. The same way that the regime tried to circumvent sanctions, people trying to circumvent dictatorial regimes with cryptocurrency. What is going to be the future of coins like Bitcoin? And I don't know, because again, it's risky. But I'm all for it. I'm all for it for people trying to find ways to be independent, or find ways to try to, I don't know, have safer assets and different assets and be independent from the volatility of their currencies. For example, in a country like mine, 1 million% inflation rate last year, trying to find ways to circumvent that. Currency control since 2003. Imagine that, even more than a decade and a half without the opportunity to buy X amount of dollars that you want for importation, for exportation, and for savings. So yeah, thank you for your question.
So I'm from Colombia, so I know a little bit about the situation that is happening to Venezuela, because it has affected us a lot as well. But I was just wondering. So you said it's a humanitarian crisis, right? But I want to know exactly why do you call it a humanitarian crisis? Like, think about the term, what entails, and also I want to know your opinion of why Maduro is he's saying that it's not a humanitarian crisis.
First of all, yes, you want to know the whys as well, correct? That was your question?
Yeah. So why, can you hear me? Yeah. So basically I want to know, why exactly do you call it humanitarian crisis? Because you said it's
yeah.
But I want to know exactly, why
yeah.
you call it that, and why Maduro is not.
Yeah, the first question is why it is a humanitarian crisis. First of all, not only Venezuela has an economic collapse of 60% of GDP, which is a lot. We're talking about more than 50% of the economy just gone. 50% of jobs are gone. But why we call it a humanitarian crisis? Is because that economic decline produced a lot of stress and problems in the people that were below a certain level of income. So right now you have 7 million people in Venezuela, and this is according to the UN, that they need shelter, that they need antibiotics, that they need water supply, and that they need these basic things that you need to survive. And when you don't have that, it is a humanitarian crisis. And why we don't have medicine, for example? Because you have the government impose a control on importation of medicines. Why you don't have food in Venezuela? Because the government expropriated millions of farms. My grandparents are farmers, and they expropriated their things. And that's why you don't have food, that's why you don't have medicine, you don't have water supply in Venezuela, because all the projects of the investment that the public sector had in Venezuela, they just stole the money, and the infrastructure that was already in place is already obsolete and is too old. So that's why you have a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. And Maduro, of course, is not acknowledging that it's a humanitarian crisis, because he wants to make everyone believe that things are okay in Venezuela, when everyone knows that they are not okay. And because everyone, I'm sure here, has even a friend from Venezuela, or someone who left Venezuela, or someone who knows a Venezuela who left. And I think that the things that we say is the reality. When you hear people, and not politicians, when you hear people just outside in the street, pay attention to them. Those are the people that are speaking the truth. Those are the people that we need to listen. So if you meet a Venezuelan, ask them how is the situation with your family in Venezuela. And without a doubt, they will tell you that things are extremely horrible for many people. Because it's not only about money, it's about fundamental things, such as, again, shelter, antibiotics. Imagine you have a grandfather, for example, that need cancer treatment, and you don't have it. What do you do? And you cannot go to a hospital. And even you want to pay for it, there is none. That's why it's a humanitarian crisis. And I'm sure many of us have a situation like that one.
Yeah, just behind, next to the lady who spoke. Yeah.
Thank you for coming. So one quick question. What, in your opinion, would a political solution to the crisis look like? Maduro doesn't look like he's going anywhere soon. And to what extent would the members of the old regime and the security sector be included in a subsequent political process? Thank you.
The first thing is that every political solution that we can find demands domestic action and international action. It demands that we have people inside Venezuela organizing themselves, organizing the communities, organizing the activists, the few of them that are still in Venezuela, organizing the ecologists, and that we need to have people activated in Venezuela. And outside Venezuela, you need to have people talking to think tanks, universities, foreign governments, so then we can have a strong coalition of countries pushing a change in Venezuela. And then how can we try to, how can we find a way that these two forces work together towards a solution? That's what we all want, a peaceful and democratic solution. How can you do that when you have a regime that is saying no to every solution and that is going even more to power? That's what we're trying to change. We're trying to change it through international pressure and domestic mobilization. And then your last question about how much involvement there will be from the previous regime, that's the question that I think that not even me has an answer. Because there is not only a moral thing about, for example, if someone was in a regime that commit human rights violations, how can they be in the government that will make a change? But at the same time, it's politics, so you never know. You never know who your ally would be. In my opinion, everyone that commits a human rights violation, or everyone that right now is in the regime, cannot be part of the solution. Will that be achievable in reality? I don't know, and I hope not. And I hope that we can make a solution that doesn't involve people like them, people that are just paying zero attention to what is happening right now. So that will be my answer.
This guy over here.
Hello, thank you for coming here. My question, I'm from Austria, and what could be surprising for you is in Austria for a lot of universities, especially humanitarian universities, people have a lot of sympathy with socialism. And in 2015, one of the more influential members of the Social Democrats in Austria said that we should be more like Venezuela. What would you reply to them, and what would you tell them if they're telling that to you?
That if an elected leader says that they want to be more like Venezuela, it is irresponsible, it is crazy. It means that you want your country to be devastated, like Venezuela. It means that you want a country that is in a dictatorship. So with those people, I think we need to throw them out of office, and we need to be the first one in the opposition against them. And about your first part of the question, about the public sentiment about socialism, about the way people feel about socialism, I think it's our job, and I really mean this, it's our job to try to talk to them, try to understand them, try to see what matters most for them, and then talk to them about what we believe is right, why we believe that, for example, with the markets, with open markets, you will have less poverty. Why do we believe that we need to have democracy, liberal democracy with rule of law? And I think it's our responsibility to convince them that we also care about their problems, but we have different solutions. And we take care of them. And that's something that I think we in Venezuela we need to have when we rebuild our country. It's not only about designing some public policy or some new economic model. It's not only about that. It's about trying to make a consensus with even the people that may believe something different than you, and trying to bring them to your side or maybe find a consensus. And I always say we need to have definitions about what do you want, because for some people socialism means something, for other people means something different. And I think again it's our job to build bridges with them, to tell them what we believe, and to find ways that they understand that you should not want to have a country like Venezuela right now, with a humanitarian crisis and no political freedom. No one will want that. So, yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah, Josiah. Hello.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your personal experiences and how you came to be a member of the Venezuelan opposition, and also the difficulties in coming against such a powerful and restrictive government.
Thank you. I began in politics when I was very young. Not in politics, I don't want to say that word. I began working in this when I was like 15 years old, 16 years old, because I saw how contradictory it is to have a country in which you have so much oil reserves, how much poverty you have. So I started going to the communities, understand them better, because sometimes we live in bubbles and we don't know what is happening outside. So I tried to do that when I was 15 years old. And I started protesting, and I started cooperating, and started talking to the student movement. I was still in high school, but I started talking to the movement in college. And that's why I got involved. I got involved with at the beginning with a political party called People's Will, which is the political party of Juan Guaido as well, our current president. But then in 2014, things got really difficult. Leopoldo Lopez, who is a political leader in Venezuela, was in prison in 2014, and he was the leader of our party. And many people, many activists of the party were jailed. So I took a difficult decision with my family, because again I was 17, 18 years old, of going to the US and studying in the US. So I studied economics in the US, and my dream was to come back after I finished my 4 years. I thought things would be better after the 4 years that I spent in the US, but sadly it was not the case. And in the middle of when I was in the US studying, it went the 2017 really difficult protest. In 2017, we had more than 4 months protesting in Venezuela. But it was in the US, and I could not be there. And that was killing me, really. That I saw my friends, the people I love, even my family, my little sister and my mother going to protest. And I was in the US having a good life, in a college experience. So that's when I decide, okay, I can do something from the outside. I can talk to people, I can talk to NGOs, I can talk to government, I can go to places like here in Cambridge and talk to you and motivate you, and finding ways that we can work together. And since then, I've been doing that. I've been working, and being like a bridge between people in Venezuela and people outside Venezuela. And that's why my foundation, the Venezuelan Alliance, I want them to become. I'm just starting it. But we want to be a platform, an international platform for initiatives that are working in Venezuela, and that people from outside Venezuela can also work with them and try to make them better. So that's my history. And in terms of coming back to Venezuela, sadly I cannot come back. I have since July 13 of 2016 that I'm not in Venezuela. And you cannot even imagine how difficult that is, to not being able to go to your neighborhood or the place that you grew up or your high school, or seeing most of my grandparents. I haven't seen them since then. And I could give a whole lecture about how the life of an expat. It has been by far the most challenging thing, not being able to go to your country and again, see the people that you love and talk to them. And right now my best friends are right now all over the world, if they're not in Venezuela. So it's also difficult to not be with friends and the people that you care about, like family. So thank you for the question.
Just that, yeah.
Hi. So my question is that, you'd mentioned that promoting democracy is sort of central to the work that you're doing in Venezuela, right?
Sorry, what?
You mentioned how promoting democracy is sort of at the center of the work you're trying to accomplish in Venezuela, right? And at the same time, you also mentioned how, for example, at Chavez's time, we essentially saw votes being bought because of the rich and the powerful using socialist policies of the time. So when we talk about introducing democracy once again, how do you envision bringing it without leaving it vulnerable once again to the rich sort of using their economic power to buy political power, especially at a time of such inequality?
Yeah, there needs to be a whole reshape and redesign of our political institutions. There needs to be a whole redesign of the way the check and balances that we have in our government and the rule of law. And as I mentioned, the judiciary system and the electoral system. And all these things need to be redesigned from nothing. We need to have one day, I think, a new constitution in Venezuela. And we need to find ways that we can constrain these bad incentives that the new democracy will have, because it will have it. Because imagine that right now, for example, all the economic resources are in the hands of the crooks. Then when we have a democracy, who will have the advantage? Who will have more power? Who will have more connections in the military and things like that? So I think that's a huge challenge. A challenge that I think needs to be addressed, not by me talking a few sentences about it, but by really going to the details. Writing a paper, seeing other examples, and trying to really design a good plan for that. Because I think there are two elements that will be extremely challenging. One is that one, redesigning the political system. And the other one, how can we pacify the country again? How can we have a peaceful country again? Venezuela right now is extremely violent. 70% of the territory is controlled by militia groups or terrorist groups or drug dealers. 70% of the territory. How can we address that? How can we have, again, a government that has the monopoly of violence and that has police and military that is unbalanced, that there is balance and non-arbitrary, and they want to respect the Constitution? How can we do that? And I think those are two difficult challenges that we have. Because, for example, the economic aspect of things, I think we have the theory, we have how can we reshape our economic institutions, and I think that's something that we can, it's more, not easy, more easy, but I think that's something that we can do. With reshaping political institutions and with criminality, I think we have to do a ton of work. And for that, we need academics, and we need professors, and we need people that know about the subject, and cooperate, professors, maybe even here in Cambridge, that can and want to work on that. I'm all for that, definitely.
Yep, just that.
Hi, thank you for coming. With everything happening in other countries of the Latin American region, like Chile and Ecuador, I was thinking about the role of social movements, right? I mean, like, we know that by nature, authoritarian governments erode, undermine grassroots movements and everything. But I was thinking, like, has there been such an attempt in Venezuela in the past? I mean, maybe, I don't know if in the recent years, but when Chavez died, that was like a window of opportunity for change, like a rupture. Has there been such an attempt of social movement and protest in the country?
And where are you from, by the way?
Peru.
From Peru, okay. Your name?
Maria Fernanda.
Maria. And it's, right now Latin America is a very complex region of the world. You have just on Sunday, the socialists and the Peronists won again in Argentina, for example. You have Andrés Manuel López Obrador in Mexico. And you have in Peru this whole debate with the legislative branch that was closed, like, and Vizcarra and all this kind of stuff. And regard to your question about Latin America, I think in Latin America we need to solve the main issue that we have. That is that we have a lot of people that feel that they are disenfranchised, that they don't have enough empowerment. You have a lot of people in Latin America that are in poverty and bad conditions. And I think until we have that, and we integrate them to the entire country, and we try to break barriers between different sectors, I think until we have that, you will have always an unstable Latin America. We need to find ways that the political elite, the business elite, the academic elite, and the people feel connected in Latin America. And that above all, people feel that the system is fair to them. Doesn't matter who is elected. And I think until we have that, we'll have many issues in Latin America, because again, it's so volatile, it's so much poverty, it's so much of a difficult past as well. And that's something that, for example, here in the UK, I would like to say that in Latin America we have a difficult past. We have a past full of dictatorships, of civil wars, of colonial institutions. And it's difficult to build countries from that. Interestingly and paradoxically, in the 80s, Venezuela was the example of the region. Venezuela was the only country in the 80s, not the only one, but the main one without a dictatorship, or was the main one with economic opportunities. And now look at us. Why? I think because we didn't pay attention to how to fix the main issue that I see in Latin America, that is fixing how much millions and millions of people feel that they're not represented. So I think we need to do a harder job on that. And In regards to your second question, that it was about protest in Venezuela, we have protested for years, a lot. The first one, in fact, even as far as 2000, 2001, 2002, millions of people went to the streets, and you can go to YouTube and try to see the protest. Well, we were not able to make it. And after Chavez died in 2013, we went to the ballots and we voted against Maduro. And according to several international organizations, according to a lot of independent studies, we won that election with Enrique Capriles Radowski, who was a candidate at the time. And even there is a journalist from Peru, Jaime Bailey, that even called Capriles president at the time. And I can tell you from experience, I was very young at the time. I'm 23 now, so when Chavez rose to power in '98, I was 2 years old. So in 2013, people really believed that there was going to make a change. I remember I was a senior in high school, and people really believed that. And then 2014, we went to the streets. And then I answered your question. 2014 is when I was really involved in the protest as an activist, nothing more than that. Trying to coordinate people in different areas of my city. And we went to the streets, and it was not political parties, it was really the young people. Political parties were trying to channel those protests, but it was really people in universities, even high schools, trying to do something. But we couldn't, because people were killed, because activists were in jail, because many of us left. That I don't know if it was the right decision or not. I think about it a lot, and that's why I'm trying to do things like this one, to keep helping people. But I'm sure that soon we will make a change in our country. Thank you for the question.
I don't know how much time we've got. We've got time for one more question, or do we need to wrap up? Where's the timekeeper at the back? One more, okay. I think you've had your hand up quite a long time, so I shall go for you.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk, some very interesting points. You spoke about in your talk about how the situation in Venezuela has been geopoliticized. Yep. My question is, surely if in a hypothetical situation where the Maduro government is overthrown, would that not leave a power vacuum which would make Venezuela very vulnerable to foreign interference, further geopoliticizing the current situation?
Okay, so right now about the foreign vacuum, and also about the international geopolitical things. Right now in Venezuela, I just mentioned that 70% of the territory is controlled by guerrilla groups. So they're basically the first thing of a failed state in Venezuela. Also, you have the involvement of Russia and Cuba and China in Venezuela. So Venezuela is right now a country really colonized by these powers of the world. So that's the way I see it. I see a country that is right now in exactly what you fear of being. So what we need to do right now, we need to make a change in Venezuela, and we need to have a clear path, political path, economic path, and international affair and diplomatic path. So that way we can create the conditions to have, again, rule of law, and to have a government that can govern, that has the capacity to implement public policy or implement property rights. Because that's difficult. Because we all know, for example, that we need to implement property rights. But it's not only that you need to do it, it's how you do it. How can you have the monopoly of violence again? How can you, for example, again, have a judicial system that is impartial again? And all these questions are questions of capacity, of a state rebuilding. That's the way they call it in international development. And I think that exactly what you fear is what is happening right now. That is a country invaded by superpowers, China, Russia, and Cuba, a quasi-power vacuum in the regime, and that basically the military controlling it, from businesses, from influence, from the fact that they have all the force. So I think that's one of the reasons that Venezuela is right now so unstable, because it's already, in many ways, a failed state in terms of state capacity, the monopoly of violence, and in terms of the functioning of the everyday of the state.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for being here, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks to you.
One round of applause for you. Yeah?
No, you should. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, before you all leave, we've got a few announcements. The first is on Wilberforce matters. So the Wilberforce Society is the student think tank here at Cambridge. We have a few events coming up tomorrow, which is going to be a debate between two leading economists on the impact of no-deal Brexit. They disagree slightly on this. So we'll be hosting that in the economics faculty at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow. It's open to all. Our annual conference will also take place here at the Cambridge Union in Lent 2020, so please follow our Facebook page for more updates on our events and also on our work. We write, our main arm of work is actually policy papers. We've got quite a few being published on a range of different matters, so follow us for that. Some union announcements as well. The debate this Thursday is titled "This House Would Codify the British Constitution." It is featuring Lord Sumption, A.C. Grayling, Lord Grabbanner and Helena Mountfield QC. It should be very exciting, so hopefully you can all come. And finally, the second batch of Cayley tickets, so this is a slightly more light-hearted announcement, for Saturday have just been released, and are selling out fast. So if you want to dance off the week of politics with Cayley, please buy one of those and come along too. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done. That's really good.